Hello everyone, my name is Logan and welcome to the Cocoa Chronicles, unwrapping Ghana's cocoa industry, my master's culminating project. I'm a graduate student and I study international development and global health at UB School of Architecture and Planning. This podcast mini-series will be dedicated to the Ghanaian cocoa industry, specifically topics surrounding cocoa smuggling and illegal mining on cocoa farmland. This past January, I had the opportunity to travel for 2 weeks with the UB School of Management to Accra, Ghana. Coming into this trip, my original research focus was to gain practical knowledge surrounding agricultural practices in the country, specifically for women from Accra. Once I arrived, I almost immediately realized that my project would specifically target the cocoa industry. Every time discussions about agriculture were had, cocoa became the primary focus. While traveling with the UB School of Management, I explored the cities of Accra and Cape Coast. I visited the Kakum National Forest, and I saw parts of northern Ghana, particularly Tema, and I had an amazing time learning about Ghanaian history and the culture with my fellow classmates, and I would really love the opportunity to go back someday. Throughout this series, I will focus on a few specific sites that I visited. This includes our group visit to the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana, our visit to a village school, and my apologies for mispronouncing the name, but I'm going to try my best, the village school of Kapone Balawashi, and then our business trip to the chocolate factory. Our first site visit was the trip to the Choco Love Factory, and this is a manufacturing business that sells high-quality Ghanaian chocolate and is located in the city of Accra. On this trip, we learned about how they make and produce their chocolate, package their products, and so on. It was on this trip where one of our supervisors asked something to the effect of, "Where do you get your cocoa from?" or "Do you grow your own cocoa?" And their response was, "Well, the government owns all the cocoa." And to put it plainly, I was confused, but I was also intrigued. What did they mean the government owns all the cocoa? Theoretically, I thought you could just go to the store and buy some cocoa seeds, like we do in the US with almost all of our foods and plants. So for this first episode, I really wanted to give you a bit of background information on Ghana as a whole and their cocoa industry. And before we dive into the episode, there are some housekeeping things that I want to go over. All of the references for this episode will be on my website, everythinglogan.me, along with the episode's description. So, Ghana is the second largest producer of cocoa behind Côte d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast, Ghana's neighboring country. And between 2019 and 2021, Ghana accounted for 15% of global cocoa production, according to the FAO. Also according to the FAO, 55.4% of Ghana's land area is devoted to the agricultural industry. Comparably, in the US, our numbers sit around 52.2% of our land is set aside for agricultural use, and this number also includes livestock pastures. Now, while I was unable to find a source that just handed over the percentage of land in Ghana that is specifically for cocoa plantations or farms, I was able to find some key data points. According to the NIH, Ghana has roughly 2.15 million hectares of cocoa farms, and a quick Google search finds that Ghana is 23.853 million hectares in size. So according to my quick math, this equates to roughly 11% of Ghana's total land area is devoted to cocoa. Now, I also found that Ghana has 4.708 million hectares of arable land. Arable land is land that is, quote, fit for or used for the growing of crops. So Ghana's agricultural land, which is 4.8 million hectares, 2.15 million hectares are in cocoa farming. So roughly 50% of all of Ghana's arable land is dedicated to cocoa production. So with cocoa acting as one of the country's primary cash crops, the government of Ghana worked to try to ensure the steady growth of the industry and to control prices. According to Harrison Doe, a research scientist from the Science and Technology Policy Research Institute in Accra, the cocoa sector contributes roughly 3.5% of the nation's GDP. And according to the FAO, it provides a living for about 30% of Ghanaians, or 850,000 families. Again, to compare this to the US, this would be roughly 2.25 billion US dollars in government revenue. In Ghana, the agricultural sector as a whole contributes up to 18.3% of the nation's GDP, this data coming from the CIA in 2017. To provide more context, in the US, the same dataset shows that agriculture accounts for less than 1% of our nation's GDP. In other words, agriculture is very important to the Ghanaian economy, and cocoa production supports almost a third of its population. So hopefully that gives you a good look at the bigger picture here when we're talking about the large-scale economics of agriculture in Ghana and the cocoa industry. I now want to zoom in and look at the direct relationship between farmers and the cocoa industry. But in order to do that, we first need to discuss the role of the Ghanaian government within the cocoa industry. The relationship between the Ghanaian government and cocoa farmers is quite unique. In 1947, the country's government created an affiliate organization called the Ghana Cocoa Board, which facilitates a multitude of processes within the cocoa industry. These processes can be split into two sectors, pre and post-harvest. Pre-harvest includes research, which is conducted in the Cocoa Research Institute, for which we visited, seed selling and purchasing, and the monitoring of cocoa plant health. Post-harvest includes things like quality control, marketing, and selling or distribution. With those activities, the Ghanaian government is the biggest player within the industry. Essentially, the Ghanaian government, for better or for worse, has a quasi-monopoly on the cocoa industry. They nationalized the cocoa industry, fixing or setting a minimum price for farmers, controlling exportation of the product, and by having a hand in many aspects of cocoa tree production and cocoa processing. This is not to say that the government of Ghana controls all agricultural sectors, but simply to say that the cocoa industry is a rare and unique situation. And here is where my research really began to take shape. During the start of our second week in Ghana, the UB team visited the Cocoa Research Institute, a subsidiary of the Ghana Cocoa Board. On this trip, we got to hear about the perspectives of the cocoa industry through the eyes of the government officials and learn about what ways the Ghanaian government is currently tackling or hopes to tackle illegal activity. The Cocoa Research Institute is tucked away in the northern city of Tema, Ghana. On our roughly 2-hour drive up to the facility, we passed through many small towns and villages where women were selling fresh fruits and vegetables. We saw children walking to and from school in their uniforms, and we had a breathtaking view of the forestry and natural beauty of the country. To get to the Institute, we traveled what seemed to be up the side of a mountain and through many peaks and valleys as we traveled further and further north away from the country's capital. Once we arrived at the Institute, we were greeted by the staff and had the opportunity to walk the grounds and see what different projects and work they do at the Research Institute. The Institute looks very much like a campus, various buildings dedicated to different aspects of cocoa research, all separated by lush green spaces. The work conducted at the Cocoa Research Institute is very diverse. They primarily conduct research on cocoa tree viruses and infection. Trying to find new and innovative ways to combat crop loss due to illness. They grow their own cocoa trees, process cocoa, and create their own chocolate products. And while cocoa is in their name, they don't strictly operate with just cocoa. They also have shea, cola, cashew, and coffee plants and products. Our group settled in the conference room, and the agriculture executive director of the Cocoa Research Institute led our group discussion and gave us an overview of the history and research focus of the institute. Our group led the Q&A portion of the presentation and helped steer the discussion towards our more hard-hitting questions. When asked about the role of the Ghanaian government within the cocoa industry, he described it as a collective load scheme, where the farmers are given annual stipends to tend to the cocoa trees, harvest the plants, and do the day-to-day labor of cocoa farming, and the Ghana Cocoa Board will help facilitate the rest of the processes. And while farmers are not making 100% profit off their products through this scheme, they are being supported by the Cocoa Board or the Ghanaian government in various other ways, such as getting free fertilizer, tools, and other support systems or necessary infrastructure. And for now, I will put a pin in this talking point, as in the next episode, I will dive further into those numbers, further examining if this collective load scheme provides a livable wage for farmers. The sponsor for today's episode is the UB Community for Global Health Equity. CGHE supports those who most influence global health, leaders, organizations, and policymakers who can affect systemic change, and community members across the world who can inspire, promote, and implement solutions in their respective neighborhoods. Their solution-oriented, transdisciplinary approach seeks to contribute forward-thinking approaches to promote health equity across the globe. For more information about the Research Center and for how to get involved, visit their website at buffalo.edu/global health equity. Now, back to the episode. So while this deal is a bit different than what we are used to in the US, this comes off as a somewhat fair deal, right? Well, through my research, I found that there are a few drawbacks to the system. According to my trip to the Cocoa Research Institute and the background knowledge they provided us with their presentation, it can take anywhere from 18 months to 3 whole years for cocoa trees to bear its fruit. Additionally, cocoa farming, like all other agricultural pursuits, comes with a persistent battle with plant disease, viral infection, and pests. The Cocoa Research Institute executive director stated that the biggest cost from the Ghanaian government is to cut cocoa trees that have been affected by viral disease, which can appear in the plant year-round. While the Ghanaian government and cocoa board assumes the burden of these costs to clear the infected trees and replace new ones, at the end of the day, a lower product yield means a lower annual income for the farmer. Is the level of risk assumed by the cocoa industry stakeholders and overall labor required by farmers worth it? Ghanaian University research reported that in 2021, that Ghanaian farmers earn on average $1.42 per person per day, with the living income benchmark being $2.08. From this statistic, Ghanaian farmers would need to make roughly 46% more to reach a livable wage. And there's more to come on these numbers in the next episode. So here's where our first issue arises: cocoa smuggling. In an effort to receive larger compensation for their time and labor, some farmers elect to illegally smuggle their cocoa beans across the border. In a recent news article from Africa News, Benjamin Taylor Way, Deputy Director of Communications at the Cocoa Board, said, and I quote, "In 2022, Ghana lost around 150,000 metric tons of cocoa beans to smuggling with our neighbors, which represents a colossal revenue of $600 million. Now, this $600 million can be seen as a loss, as this quote illustrates, but it can also be seen as a gain for the farmers that smuggled their product. This statistic really just shows how lucrative smuggling is and why many cocoa farmers are moving toward illegal cocoa smuggling." In the same article, and I'm directly quoting here, Fred Owusu-Adadi, campaigner at EcoCare Ghana, an organization that campaigns for the welfare of farmers, believes that the government still needs to improve prices and living standards for farmers. Now, some farmers have even elected to abandon cocoa farming altogether, as it simply wasn't profitable enough for themselves or their families. And here arises our second issue: illegal mining. Gold mining in Ghana has been around for centuries, dating back to the Ashanti Kingdom, and of course being one of the many driving forces for colonial powers to control the region. Mining within the country has evolved and changed throughout time, and is now found to be both a legal and illegal form of income. The Ghana Cocoa Board reported that between 2019 and 2020, Ghanaian landowners sold over 19,000 hectares of cocoa farming land. Outside of lost land for the cocoa industry and calling into question the importance of generationally held jobs like farming, illegal mining impacts the greater country, as these practices can impact water quality and other environmental and health factors. In the episodes to come, we will dive deep into the histories and implications of cocoa smuggling and illegal mining in relation to cocoa farmland. The music for this series is produced by Alex Productions, and for more information on that, please head to the episode's transcript. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you continue to follow along as we learn more about the problem areas and points of contention within the Ghanaian cocoa industry.